So we get started. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man tabi'ahum bi isanin ila yawmiddin wa ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so this of course is a special bonus session for the adult study group. As you know, we just started doing tafsir and tazkiyah. Tafsir from Mujiruddin Ulaymi's book, Fath Rahman, and we have been covering Abul-Abbas Ahmad ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi rahimahullah ta'ala's book, or his summary called Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin, for quite some time, and we just picked that up again. And as you may know, both of these authors are from Palestine, or they originate from that region, and this is the fifth Tuesday, and on every fifth Tuesday, which happens every so often, we're going to be looking at a biography of one of the scholars of our past. And it just so happens that we're going to be talking about Najmuddin Abul-Abbas Ahmad ibn Shaykh al-Islam Shamsuddin Abdul-Rahman ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi al-Salihi al-Hanbali. So this is the author of Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin. We did not discuss his biography, which was typical of what we do when we begin a new book. We talk about the author a little bit. But in this case, we did not do that several years ago when we started to go over the text, and so this is kind of a makeup. But it's rather serendipitous because we get to cover one of the great imams from Palestine. Or I should say his lineage is from Bayt al-Maqdis, or the Holy Land there in Jerusalem. So to look at, if you can see this here, this should be a kind of a lineage, if you will. And you will see it begins here with Qudama, and then his son Muhammad, and then his son Ahmad, and then who's after that? Muhammad. Yes, he had Muhammad and Abdullah, and then Abdul-Rahman, and then Ahmad, who is the one we're talking about today. So Ahmad is the author, Abul-Abbas. So Ahmad, who is the son of Abdul-Rahman. Abdul-Rahman is known as Shaykh al-Islam Shamsuddin. We've talked about him a few times. He's known as Ash-Sharih. He was the one that offered some commentary and explanation on al-Mughni. And al-Mughni, of course, we know is the great work of Ibn Qudam al-Maqdisi. And Abdul-Rahman was the nephew of Ibn Qudama. So that's where the relationship is, because Abdul-Rahman's father, Muhammad, is known as Abu Umar, is the brother of Abdullah. Abdullah is the Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi that we all are familiar with, the author of al-Mughni and so many other great works. So that means Ahmad here, our focus tonight, is the great nephew, if you will, of Ibn Qudama, meaning Ibn Qudama is his great uncle. Okay, so they are from the same lineage. And then you had, of course, grandfather Abu Umar. He was the older brother of Muwaffiquddin ibn Qudama. And then his father, Ahmad, was the one that migrated from Palestine to Syria. That's when the family of al-Maqdisi, they migrated. And that was, of course, during the time of the Crusades. And we talked about this to some degree when we looked at Ibn Qudama's biography, or at least a short version of that. We spent about an hour actually talking about his biography. So it was Ahmad that migrated from Palestine to Syria during the time of the Crusades, and they were basically leaving because it was quite a difficult scenario, as you might imagine. The Crusades had various waves, and so they were in the midst of one of those waves. Of course, Ibn Qudama fought alongside Salahuddin al-Ayyubi when they were fighting against the Crusaders. And we will come to find out that his great nephew Abul-Abbas Ahmad Najmuddin also fought and went to battle with the Crusaders as well. And then there was Muhammad ibn Qudama. And Qudama, as I mentioned last time, was the first of the family to be introduced to the Hanbali madhab, and of course began the path of knowledge along that tradition. And this is while they were still in Palestine, in Jamma'il. Jamma'il, we're going to look at shortly on a map. You can get an idea where that is. They were visited by one of the great Imams, Abul-Faraj, Abdul-Wahid ibn Muhammad al-Shirazi, who was one of the great Hanbali Imams of the time. And he went to that region in order to spread the school of Imam Ahmad. And this is what Ibn Qudama mentions himself, saying that they were all the blessing, the barakah of Abul-Faraj. So they just continued this tradition, even after they had to leave and flee as refugees, if you will. And then, of course, that planted a seed there in Damascus, in the neighborhood called Salihiyah. And that's kind of where al-Maqdisi, they established themselves, developed the area, built masjid, built schools, built infrastructure. And essentially that area that they moved into, that neighborhood now, which is still standing until today, and the remnants of their efforts, like the masjid and the schools and the things, are still there till this very day. You can just see the great investment that they put into their place of migration. Right? Even though I'm sure home is where the heart is, right? And their heart was probably always, as you can see, their ascription to Bayt al-Maqdis. They did, however, invest in the place that they were at. So he was born in Sha'ban, 651 of the Hijra calendar. This is 1253 of the Gregorian calendar. So that's quite some time ago, in As-Salihiyah. That's where he was born. So he wasn't born in Palestine. His family was originally from Palestine, as we understood, from, let's say, his great-great-grandfather, I should say, who ended up migrating there, though he retained the ascription al-Maqdisi. He retained that. Instead of, like, it basically means that's an ascription like al-Amriki, meaning I'm from America. That's what I might say. I used to say that when I was abroad. It's like people can distinguish between different people based on where they're from. There's al-Pakistani, and there's al-Hindi, and there's Brittani, etc., etc. So he retained that ascription al-Maqdisi, even though he was born in Salih in Dimashq. So that just goes to show their identity was always connected and linked to Bayt al-Maqdis. And that is an obvious honor that they were retaining by ascribing themselves to such a place. So like many of the great scholars and imams, he began studying at a very young age. He studied hadith, and he studied and he listened to their narrations. That was a tradition of the past, is that the scholars of hadith would gather people and they would recite hadith, essentially, narrating them. And the people would come and listen. And that's what it would be. It would just be a gathering of hadith, not teaching and explaining. That's another topic, explaining the explanation of hadith. But this is just listening to the narrations. And so this is what he did at a young age. And he listened to a number of imams during that time. Khatib al-Marda, for example, was one. And Ahmad ibn Abd al-Maqdisi was another among those that he listened to. So Khatib al-Marda, this is where I want to take a quick pause. Is one of the great imams, Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Maqdisi. He was born in 566 and passed away in 656. Here, we're getting a map, right? Okay, good. That's what I wanted. And so if you can't see this, you can look it up, because this is, I looked this up. You can find these maps on Google, etc. So Marda is, it's a city, I should say it's a village in the West Bank. And I thought this would be interesting to look at because of everything that's going on right now. Marda is a village in the West Bank, and it's just south of Jamma'il. And Jamma'il was where the Maqdisi were originally from, or that's where they ended up at some point. And today it's called Jamma'in. You find that on the map as Jamma'in. Back during that time it was called Jamma'il. So you had Jamma'il, and then you had al-Marda. Marda is associated with the ascription of al-Mardawi. I've mentioned that name numerous times. The author of Al-Insaf, his last name or his ascription was al-Mardawi, Alauddin al-Mardawi, one of the great imams of the madhab. Was also from that region, al-Marda. So Khatib al-Marda, Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Ismail, he was from that region, though he moved to Damascus, and that's where he began to memorize the Quran and to learn, and he studied and became a scholar, and he benefited a great deal, a great many people in Damascus. And then it said that before he passed away in 656 Hijrah, he went back to his village of Marda. Now, if you look at the map, you can get an idea of where that's located in the West Bank. And if you look at, so there's a map here that's got the general, like Google map, you could pull that up, you can see where it is with the red dot, okay? And of course, during that time, okay, it should be obvious and clear that that was a Muslim area minus the presence of the Crusaders. So the Crusaders were still there. So there were obviously the Christians that came in and they took over portions of that land, especially on the coast. That's mostly where they were at, on the coastal cities. That was it. You know, it's not like the land that we have today where it's all got you know, various different borders and boundaries and stuff. And then if you look over here on this side of the screen, if you can see that, again, you can look this up. You can see a current map of the West Bank along with the Israeli settlements. All right? Okay, so if you look for Marda, I've highlighted it with a red arrow, and everything in blue on that map is an Israeli settlement. So you can see the West Bank is filled with settlements. And of course, if you look at the strategy behind those settlements, there's settlements that are marked as military zones for the army. It's like land for the army. And then there are bases, and then there are outposts. And the outposts are typically where residents live. And they have this way of doing it where they are integrating these settlements into the West Bank in such that there are pockets everywhere that separate neighborhoods. So Marda is right north of a major settlement, and below it is another Palestinian village. So they're doing that to kind of, and basically, it blocks off the area. So they're like almost enclosed neighborhoods. If you look at Google Map and you look up Marda, you can see, and you zoom into the street level. This is very interesting. You zoom into the street level and you get street names. Right? So you zoom in, you can see the area of Marda, and then just below it you can see so all of the names are in Arabic, right? So you can see Arabic language, okay? And then you go southward just a little bit and you see where the settlement's at, and all the street names are in Hebrew. And then you go south beyond that, and you see the next Palestinian Arab village, and the street names are back in Arabic. And so you can kind of get an idea of what it looks like today versus what it was back during that time. So yeah, that gives you kind of an idea then and now, and the challenges that they were facing in the region that time, and the challenges they're facing in the region right now. So Najm-ud-Din, he studied. Obviously, as I mentioned, he listened to hadith from various scholars, and then he studied fiqh with his father. I mean, his father was Shaykh al-Islam. So, you know, you have a school right there at your home. He was the leading scholar, the leading authority, and his son, of course, benefited greatly from his own father. And his father, as being at the level that he was considered the chief justice, if you will. And he was the head teacher of the Hanabila there in their hood, Salihiyah. And when he decided to retire, Abdul-Rahman al-Sharih wanted to retire. He retired himself. He basically like, I'm done. And he ashara ila ibnihi. He basically, through consultation, if you will, he wanted his son to take up his post because his son was qualified. And that was before Ahmad Najm-ud-Din reached the age of 30. his father appointed him to be the Chief Justice of the area. So he became the Chief Justice before the age of 30 of that region. And when he was appointed the Chief Justice, if you will, the Chief Judge, he also took up the post of being the Khatib of that region. So like, you had the Jami' al-Hanabila, which is where they had their masjid, which is still present today, and we'll look at that. And might have another, what do we got here? Okay, there you go. There's Jami' al-Hanabila. This is the Hanbali masjid. Still present today. You can look it up on Google. You can look it up on Google Maps. It will show you exactly where it is in the event that you're visiting Damascus. You wanted to go see some of this stuff. Yeah, it's still there. It's open, still functioning. People still praying there. So you could go and you could see some of the pictures of the inside and the outside, the minaret. Jami' al-Hanabila was designed after the Umayyad Masjid, al-Jami' al-Umawi. It was designed as a miniature version of that. So there's a courtyard in the middle, and it kind of has that same architecture to it. So he became the Khatib there. He was the Imam. He was a scholar of the Hanabila at the time. So basically he took up the post of not only his father, but his forefathers before him. And he managed the Awqaf al-Hanbaliyah, right? So they had endowments. And I talked about this when we looked at the biography of Ibn Qudama, that what would happen is sometimes these places would get support from wealthy business people, or even from the government, from the ruling party. They would come in and they would support, and essentially one of the ways that they would support is they would establish an endowment. So what that meant was, they would build the masjid, or they would help fund the masjid, maybe partially or entirely, and then there would be other buildings and things that would generate income to support the functioning of that masjid or that school. And so there was an endowment, and so he became so many different roles that he had to fill, and from those roles was the endowments he had to manage for their operations there. So as a Khatib and Imam, he was also a teacher, and we got a school here, Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya al-Maqdisiyya. So he was considered a prolific teacher, very effective teacher, and not only did he teach here in Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya, but he taught in most of the schools that were around that region. So Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya, there were many schools that were named the same. Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya was a school just for the sciences of hadith, or that was the prominent subject matter that was taught there. And during this time, or around this time, I would say around the same time of Najmuddin, there was the Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya in Damascus. And guess who was teaching there? Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala. And Najmuddin's father, Sharih Abdul-Rahman, was one of Imam Nawawi's teachers. So while Najmuddin was here in a Salihiyya, teaching at this Dar al-Hadith al-Ashrafiyya, you had Imam Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala teaching at the one in Damascus. And if you can think about Imam al-Nawawi, you may remember that he lived a very short life. But his life was filled with amazing accomplishments. So we have some parallels going on here in Salihiyya and in Damascus. I mean, right in the main city center, if you will. Salihiyya is like a neighborhood in Damascus. So this was like one part, the city center, closer to Jami' al-Umawi, is where Imam Nawawi was teaching, if memory serves correct. So this is basically what you can see. This school was established for Abu Umar Muhammad ibn Ahmad. We talked about Abu Umar being the older brother of Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi. This school was built basically for him, and he was the first one to teach in that school. And then that kind of like the head teacher position passed down as the teachers would resign or turn over the reins. It's noted that he had impeccable character, Najmuddin Ahmad. And, we're going to jump ahead of there, okay. He had impeccable character. He was noted to have a strong memory. He was very intelligent, and he contributed to Islamic scholarship in a great way. From that, we obviously have Mukhtasar Minhaj al-Qasidin, which we've been reviewing. He had sound knowledge of legal rulings and a very, very keen and sharp understanding of the religion. He was also considered a poet and reported to have numerous different accomplishments and virtues throughout his life. He made Hajj multiple times. Of course, back then, it was not as easy as it is today, so that was a big deal. To make Hajj once was a big deal, let alone to do it multiple times. And he participated in more than one battle, like his great uncle Ibn Qudama. If you remember, Ibn Qudama went to battle. He fought against the Crusaders. His great nephew is following suit, participating in several battles. He was described as being very brave, and he could ride horses, and he knew how to handle a weapon. And it was said that he typically wore a sword as a part of his daily, he was carrying a piece, basically, So that's how he rolled. And so that wasn't just for show, but as I said, he fought in some battles. He fought alongside, that's what this was for here. He fought alongside Sultan al-Malik al-Mansur Sayfuddin Qalawun al-Salihi. So Qalawun was the ruler at the time, Sultan. And the Sultanate is from basically the Mamluk era. The Mamluk era. The Mamluks, they were originally slave soldiers. They were like almost hired mercenaries, if you will, if we want to put it in like more modern terms. They were like kind of, so they weren't like, the class of the Mamluks wasn't like just a laborer, but they occupied a position in society which was rather dignified and honorable because they were warriors. And they were basically being paid, if you will, or inscripted, if you will, in some way, in order to fight for the Muslim dynasty, if you will, whoever was in power at the time. And they kind of worked with a number of different groups. And eventually, they took over. They took over from the reign of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. The Ayyubid dynasty was ousted by the Mamluks. And so here you have Qalawun Salihi. He was considered the 7th sultan during the initial period of their reign. And during that time, they conquered Tripoli in Lebanon. And that was the battle that Najmuddin Ahmad ibn Qudama, he fought in alongside the Sultan. And this was done in the year 688. And so this was around I can't remember exactly, close to the end of the 1200s, 688. And it was because of this battle, this battle was a part of expelling the Crusaders in a very formal way, meaning they were formally removed from the region because of this effort, and that occurred in 1309 AD. And I'm putting that there because you can see 1309 to now, it's a long stretch of time. So something to be noted about Qalawun, the Sultan, he was himself a slave soldier, and he could barely speak Arabic. He was known as al-Alfi, Alf for 1,000, because he was bought for 1,000 dirhams, which was a lot of money. He grew in power. As I said, they had a rather dignified position. They had access to the leaders, the emirs or whoever. They were working for them. Some of them would be in political positions in the administration of the government, and some of them were soldiers. And so he was able to gain power and political influence, and he eventually was appointed an emir, like a governor, if you will, of a region. He continued to navigate through the political arena of the day, and there was some maneuvering, some real maneuvering on his part, and he assumed the position of sultan. And so he became recognized as the authority. and he was called al-Malik al-Mansur, basically the victorious king, if you will. And so, yeah, these were the efforts of the Mamluk during that time, and him in particular led up to the expulsion of the Crusaders from that region. So during that time, we'll get to you in a second. During that time, what I do want you to note is here, I mentioned Qalawun not knowing Arabic or barely speaking Arabic and basically learning Arabic because in that region, it's an Arabic region. Right? This is populated by Arab people. And you can see that with al-Maqdisi. I mean, this family, they are not speaking in a different language. Right? Al-Mughni wasn't written in a different language and then translated into Arabic. I mean, these were Arab people that were there. And the Arab community moved into that region during the time of the Khulafa al-Rashidun. Right, so that's, during the time of Umar ibn al-Khattab, they went and they conquered the Holy Land. And so the Muslims were present there until the Crusaders come, and then they expelled the Crusaders, and then they managed to occupy that time from the Mamluks. And then after the Mamluks, the Ottoman Empire took over. So the Mamluks, they basically reigned until 1250 or so, and then the Mamluks overtook the Ayyubid dynasty in 1250, and then they continued to rule until they were conquered by the Ottoman Empire in 1517. So they had, a good almost a couple hundred years, and then the Ottoman Empire took over in 1570, and so then the Ottoman Empire basically ruled that region as well, and so the Ayyubid dynasty into the Mamluk dynasty into the Ottoman dynasty. So the Ayyubid, which was the Salahuddin, they basically ruled Egypt into the Mediterranean and then into the Hijaz, which was Mecca and Medina. So they had this region. And then there were other, dynasties, if you will, you want to call them, the Islamic empires that had various other regions, right? So they were occupying Egypt and the Holy Lands, all three holy sites, until the Ottomans took over. And that's how it was. It was not until later that the Ottoman Empire was ousted, and basically, they basically they surrendered, or they were defeated, if you will. That things started to change for this particular region. So, the idea that there was nobody there in Jerusalem or in that region of Philistine, that there was nobody there. And now they're going to bring some people to occupy an empty space. That's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. I mean, it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of culture and of knowledge and of existence. And here you can see just some of that being played out. So yeah, the Mamluk here, Qalawun, of course, he was rather successful in his efforts against the Crusaders, and he not only was fighting the Crusaders, but he was managing his kind of region, if you will. He built Ribat al-Mansuri. This is located next to Masjid al-Aqsa. Ribat al-Mansuri, that's after him, Mansur, al-Malik al-Mansur. This was a place that would house the poor, and that would also host the visitors of Jerusalem. So there were a number of different things that he did for his people. That's one that you can still see to this very day. That is still standing, inshallah. So anyway, you get an idea kind of, what Najmuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul-Rahman was going through and living through, and all the while was contributing to the Muslim scholarship. He was described as being a sharp dresser, very handsome man, well-built, stout, had an imposing stature, and had a very sparse beard. They said he had sha'arat qalila, just a few little beard hairs, but nonetheless he was imposing of stature. He passed away in his home, located in Qasiyun. He died at the age of 38. So, Imam Nawawi passed away in his 30s. And I'm not comparing the two, but you see, he passed away 1 year after he fought with the Sultan. He passed away on a Tuesday, the 12th of Jumad al-Ula, this is 689, or 1290 AD. He was buried next to his father, Abdul-Rahman, and his grandfather. And his funeral was attended by leaders, judges, various dignitaries. And he left behind two sons, Sa'd al-Din al-Khatib and Fakhruddin al-Khatib. And that is the story of Najmuddin Ahmad ibn Abdul-Rahman al-Maqdisi al-Salihi al-Hanbali. Jazakallah khair.